Welcome to the deep dive. Get ready, because today we're stepping into a lost world, all the way back to the late Jurassic period.
Yeah, specifically to what we now know as Tanzania,
And we've got a true giant in our sights for this deep dive, Giraffatitan.
a really spectacular one.
So to really, wrap our heads around this incredible creature, we've gathered some fascinating pieces. We'll be looking at the story of its discovery.
Its classification, how scientists figured out where it fits.
Right, and the ongoing debates that, well, still surround it even today.
Our mission here is to dig a bit deeper, understand what makes Giraffatitan so significant,
We're talking everything from its just mind-boggling size.
to the history of its unearthing, which is quite a story in itself,
Yeah.
and the scientific discussions it continues to spark.
Okay, let's rewind the clock. We're going back to 1906,
German East Africa, a place called Tendaguru.
which means the steep hill, apparently. Very fitting.
It does, yeah. And here, a mining engineer, Bernhard Wilhelm Sattler, he stumbles across something.
Something big.
Oh yeah, a truly massive bone just sticking right out of the ground.
Wow. And that single discovery, that was the spark, right?
That was the first thread, exactly. Sattler reported his find, first to his boss, Wilhelm Arning, back in Hanover.
And from there.
Well, the news traveled. It reached the Commission for the Exploration of German Protectorates in Berlin. They were the ones overseeing geographical research in the colonies.
Got it. So the official channels got involved.
They did. And things really pick up speed when Berhard Dernberg, who was the German Secretary of State for Colonies,
Yeah.
visited the region with an industrialist, Heinrich Otto. And Otto, thinking ahead, brought along Professor Eberhard Freyes.
A paleontologist.
Exactly. As a scientific advisor. Smart move.
So Freyes gets called in.
Yep. Summer of 1907. Urgent request. Go check out Sattler's find. By late August, after a 5-day trek, he's at Tendaguru.
And he sees them. Real dinosaur bones.
Must have been incredible. Soon after, Sattler rejoined Freyes with a team, and they actually dug up 2 huge sauropod skeletons.
But not Giraffatitan yet.
Not yet, no. These became the basis for Torniaria and Genentia. But Frost knew right away, this place, Tendaguru, was incredibly rich, fossil rich.
He must have been excited.
Absolutely. He immediately started seeking funding for a much larger expedition.
And he managed to convince Wilhelm von Branca in Berlin, head of the Geological Paleontological Institute.
He did. Von Branca saw the national significance. He brought in David von Hansemann, a pathologist with good connections,
Right?
and together they set up the Tendaguru Committee, headed by a duke, no less, Johann Albrecht of Mecklenburg.
So it became quite a prestigious project.
Very much so.
Yeah.
Lots of funding from prominent German industrialists, scientists, a real national effort.
And who led the actual digging?
Von Branca chose Werner Janensch, one of his curators, and Edwin Hennig, an assistant. They arrived in Dar es Salaam in April 1909, and that's when the really big work started.
And it sounds like a monumental effort.
Huge. Initially, around 160 local porters.
Because of the tsetse flies, right? No pack
Yeah.
animals.
Exactly. Just imagine the logistics. Over 4 digging seasons, 1909 to 1912, they opened something like 100 sites.
100.
Yeah, and shipped enormous amounts of fossil material back to Germany. Crates and crates of bones.
It's hard to even picture that.
It is. And it soon became clear, alongside Torniaria and Genentia, there were other sauropods.
Like Dipriosaurus.
Right, the more common medium-sized one. But then there was this other form,
The giant.
the giant.
Yeah.
The one that dwarfed all the others. The dinosaur we now call Giraffatitan.
Okay, so where did they actually find Giraffatitan material?
Well, the very first bits, 29 tail vertebrae, came from Site D, a bit northeast of Tendaguru Hill.
Just hair bones there.
Just tail bones.
Yeah.
Then Site IX had 2 Giraffatitan 5 bones mixed in with other stuff. Site N yielded a single scattered skeleton. Bits and pieces.
But the main event was Site S.
Site S, that was the real jackpot, southwest of the hill. Excavation started there in October 1909, went on for years.
What did they find first?
First, limb bones, hip bones. Then, in 1910, ribs, parts of the backbone. And in October 1910, near some neck bones.
A skull.
A skull. That's huge for sauropod.
It really is. And get this, at first, they actually thought it was all one enormous skeleton.
But it wasn't.
Nope. Janensch eventually realized they'd actually found 2 partial skeletons lying very close together.
Wow. So they labeled them.
Yep. Skillet SI and Skelet SI, like a paleontological 2-for-1 deal.
So what was Skelet SI?
SI was a skull and 6 neck vertebrae.
And SI?
SI was even bigger, though interestingly, it was a subadult, not fully grown.
And how was it found? You mentioned something earlier.
Ah, yes. Remarkably, it was found in an upright position, legs straight down.
Like it was standing.
Possibly. The idea is it might have gotten stuck in mud, died right there.
Incredible. What parts did they recover from SII?
Quite a lot, actually. Skull bones, a good chunk of the neck and back vertebrae, ribs, the left shoulder blade, both coracoids.
Those are shoulder girdle bones, right? Correct. Both front limbs, pelvic bones, and the right hind limb. Pretty complete for such a massive animal. Gives you a really good picture.
Were there other important Giraffatitan sites?
A few others, yeah. Site Ab had 2 morphi bones. Site CZ had a jumbled, disarticulated skeleton. And Site Y yielded a medium-sized individual, including a brain case.
So these giants were definitely a major part of that landscape.
No doubt. Though, it's important to remember the challenges. Record-keeping wasn't always perfect back then.
Right.
And sadly, a lot of the original expedition documents were destroyed in a bombing raid in 1943.
Oh, no.
Yeah, and some fossils were lost over the years, too. It just shows how fragile that historical record can be.
But they still had enough material for Janish to describe it.
Oh, yes. Despite the losses, the sheer volume was incredible. In 1914, Jenge formally named the species Brachiosaurus bronchi.
Brachiosaur, so initially linked to the North American one.
Exactly, honoring Wilhelm von Branca. That was the thinking at the time, a species of Brachiosaurus, but from Africa.
And when did this dinosaur live?
Late Jurassic. Kimmeridgian to Tithonian stages, roughly 145 to 150 million years ago.
And that main skeleton, SII, that's the key specimen now.
It is. It's the lectotype, the primary reference. Skelet SI is the paralectotype, another important reference.
And people can actually see this thing.
Absolutely. If you ever get to Berlin, the Natural History Museum there has the mounted skeleton, Skelet SI.
And it's huge.
It's one of the largest and definitely one of the tallest mounted dinosaur skeletons anywhere in the world. It really hits you, the sheer scale.
Which brings us nicely to, well, its size. Giraffatitan, titanic giraffe. The name says a lot.
It really does. For a long time, it was considered the largest dinosaur known.
But not anymore.
While subsequent discoveries, particularly as some truly massive titanosaurs and also sauropod, mean it's not the absolute largest anymore.
That's still up there.
Oh, definitely. It's still one of the most massive sauropods we know from reasonably complete remains. That makes a difference.
So how big are we talking? Based on that main specimen, HMN SII.
All right, most estimates are based on SII, the subadult. Lengthwise, around 21.8 to 22.46 meters.
That's about 72, 74 feet.
Something like that. Though, funny story, there was an addition error in an early calculation. The more accurate figure is probably closer to 22.16 meters.
Okay. And height?
About 12 meters tall. 40 feet. Think of 4-story building.
Just incredible. But you said SII was a subadult?
Exactly. Which means fully grown adults could have been even bigger.
Do we have evidence for that?
We do. There's a specimen, HMNXV2, which is just a fibula, a lower leg bone, but it's 13% larger than the fibula from SII.
13% bigger. So what does that translate to in overall size?
Well, extrapolating from that suggests individuals reaching maybe 23 to 26 meters long. That's 75 to 85 feet.
And the weight, that must be enormous.
Yeah, estimates for these larger individuals are in the range of 40 to 48 metric tons.
40 to 48 tons.
Mind-boggling, isn't it? And even estimating the weight of SII has been a journey. Early estimates were all over the place, some as low as 15 tons, others up to a crazy 78 tons.
Why such a huge difference?
Mostly down to the methods used. Some early techniques were, well, pretty flawed, like using scale models and water displacement. Not very accurate for something this complex.
Ah, okay. So what do more modern estimates suggest for SII?
More recent models, using computers and taking into account things like the air sac system.
Right, the internal air sacs that lighten the skeleton.
Exactly. And better estimates of muscle mass. They put HMN SII in a more realistic range of, say, 23.3 to 39.5 metric tons.
Still incredibly heavy, 25 to 43 short tons.
Definitely. And even estimates for the bigger one, HMN XV2, have varied. Gregory S. Paul initially suggested 45 metric tons, later revised it down to 40.
But others think higher.
Yeah, Melina Perez and Laura Mendy in 2020 put it back up near 48 tons. It just shows how tricky it is to weigh an animal that's been extinct for 150 million years.
No kidding. So a truly colossal animal, let's dig into its look, its physical features.
Okay, so it's a sauropod. 4 legs, plant eater, long neck, long tail, small head, small brain relative to its body.
But the giraffe part of the name comes from?
Its proportions. Really long front legs compared to the back legs, and that incredibly long neck held high. It gives it that distinct giraffe-like build. Nature's ultimate high-browser, maybe.
Makes sense. What about the skull? Any key features?
Yeah, the skull is quite distinctive. It has this tall arch of bone right in front of the eyes.
What was that for?
Well, it enclosed the bony nasal openings,
Mm.
the nares, and some other openings too. It's quite prominent.
And the teeth?
Spatulate, like little chisels. Broad, flat.
Good for
Ripping leaves off branches. Not for chewing, really. Just grab a gulp.
Okay. And claws?
Yeah. A single claw on the first toe of the front foot, and claws on the first 3 toes of the hind feet. Gives us little clues about traction, maybe defense.
Now, one thing I always found interesting about brachiosaurs is the nostril placement debate.
Ah, yes, the classic image of them living in water with nostrils like a snorkel on top of their heads.
Right. But that's not the thinking anymore, is it?
No, not really. Lawrence Whitmer's work, comparing the skull openings to modern animals, strongly suggests the actual fleshy nostrils were much lower down.
Near the tip of the snout.
Pretty much, yeah. Like a horse or a cow, much more likely for a land-dwelling animal.
Okay. What about the idea of a trunk? I've heard that suggested.
That was a hypothesis floated some time ago, partly because the snout shape seemed, well, accommodating, and maybe some tooth wear patterns.
But it's mostly dismissed now.
Largely, yes. The tooth wear seems more consistent with just biting and tearing leaves directly. And frankly, there's no strong fossil evidence for a trunk structure.
So what was the function of those big nasal openings high on the skull arch then?
Still debated. Maybe related to sense of smell, helping it find food, as Stephen Circus suggested. Or potentially they supported some kind of fleshy crest. For display, perhaps. We see crests in other dinosaurs. It's plausible.
Interesting. Is there any lingering evidence related to the trunk idea?
Well, there's a slight quirk. The facial nerve in Giraffatitan seems to be a bit larger than in some other sauropods like Diplodocus.
And why is that relevant?
Because in animals with trunks, like elephants, that nerve is large to control all the complex trunk muscles.
So, maybe.
It's very weak evidence. It doesn't prove anything, but it leaves, let's say, a tiny, tiny possibility open for some kind of fleshy nose structure, even if not a full trunk. It's one of those fun little paleontological question marks.
Keeps things interesting. Okay, let's shift now to where Giraffatitan fits in the grand scheme. Its classification.
Right. So back when Janesh first described it, he noted that long humerus, the upper arm bone,
Shared with Brachiosaurus itself?
yes, and also Pilosaurus, and to some extent Cegiosaurus. This led him to group them in a subfamily, Brachiosaurinae, the long-armed sauropods, essentially.
And for a while, lots of different sauropods got lumped into that family, Brachiosauridae.
They did. Things like Astrodon, Bothriospondylis, Pleurocoelus, even Ultrasauros, often based on just broad similarities.
Like saying all big four-legged dinosaurs are related.
A bit like that, yeah. Many of those assignments are now considered dubious, or the genera themselves aren't valid. There was even an attempt in the 60s to put B. altithorax and B. branchi into Astrodon, but that didn't stick.
So what changed things?
Cladistics. Starting in the 1990s, these more rigorous computer-aided analyses started looking for shared unique features, synapomorphies.
And they started questioning Brachiosauridae as a natural group.
Exactly. Some researchers, like Leonardo Salgado, suggested these weren't a distinct early branch, but maybe more like early offshoots of the line leading to the bigger Titanosauriforms group.
And importantly, Salgado pointed out the lack of clear, unique, shared features between the North American Brachiosaurus altithorax
The type species, the definition of Brachiosaurus.
and the African Brachiosaurus branchi. They just weren't similar enough in the ways that matter for classification.
Precisely. Which leads us to Michael Taylor's big 2009 study.
What did he do?
He did a really detailed comparison, looked at everything vertebrae, limbs, hips, not just the obvious stuff.
And he found big differences.
Significant differences. He identified 26 distinct differences in the bones between the American and African forms.
26.
Yeah, he argued these differences were actually greater than those between clearly separate genera like Diplodocus and Barosaurus.
Wow. So his conclusion was?
Based on that evidence, he argued strongly that the African material deserved its own genus. He resurrected the name Giraffatitan.
A separate genus, Giraffatitan.
Yep, it's a pretty major taxonomic revision.
What were some of those key differences he noted?
Things like Brachiosaurus having a longer back, more dorsal vertebrae, and also a longer, taller tail compared to Giraffatitan. Differences in overall proportions.
Did everyone accept this change immediately?
Not quite. Daniel Schur initially disagreed in 2010, But since about 2012, the vast majority of studies have recognized Giraffatitan. It's pretty well established now.
But even if they're separate genera, is their exact relationship settled? Are they sister groups?
That's still a bit debated, actually. Some analyses do find them as sister taxa, each other's closest relative.
But not all.
No. For example, a 2012 study by Demick put Giraffatitan in a more basal or earlier branching position than Brachiosaurus.
While other studies found the opposite.
Right. Mannion and colleagues in 2013 found Brachiosaurus more basal.
And even more recently.
A 2024 analysis by Hahn and colleagues actually put Giraffatitan as the sister taxon to Sonorosaurus, another brachiosaurid, within a group that also contains Brachiosaurus.
So the exact branching order is still being refined.
It is. It shows how science works, you know. New data, new analyses lead to adjustments in the family tree. It's like piecing together a giant ancient puzzle.
Definitely. And just quickly, what about those other names like Abdallosaurus?
Those are basically unused or rejected synonyms. Names proposed informally or that just didn't meet the criteria. The valid name is Giraffatitan branchi. The old name, Brachiosaurus branchi, is a synonym now too, technically.
Got it. So a complex history. Let's move on to how this giant lived, its paleobiology and its world.
Okay, well, we know the brain was small for its size, about 300 cubic centimeters.
Which gives it a low EQ, that encephalization quotient.
Right. Estimates are around 0.62 to 0.79. Pretty low compared to mammals, suggesting, well, maybe not the sharpest tool in the shed, intelligence-wise, but perfectly adequate for a giant herbivore.
And what about that swelling above the hips? The second brain idea.
Yeah, that's long debunked. It's almost certainly an enlargement for glycogen bodies.
Energy storage.
Exactly, like we have glycogen in our liver and muscles. Useful for a large animal, but definitely not a brain controlling the back end.
Okay. What about metabolism? Warm-blooded, cold-blooded.
That's a huge debate for sauropods. If Giraffatitan was warm-blooded, endothermic, its energy needs would have been immense.
How much food are we talking?
Potentially over 182 kilograms. It's 400 pounds of plants every single day.
Wow. And it would grow fast.
Presumably, yes. Maybe reaching full size in around 10 years if it was warm-blooded.
And the alternative, cold-blooded or gigantothermic?
If it was cold-blooded or relied on its sheer bulk to maintain temperature gigantothermy, its food needs would be much lower.
But the downside?
Growth would be incredibly slow, potentially taking over 100 years to reach that enormous size.
A century. Hard to imagine.
It really highlights how much we still don't know about the basic physiology of these animals.
Okay, let's picture its world. The Tendaguru Formation in Tanzania, late Jurassic.
Yep, we've got pretty good dating now. The boundary between the Kimmeridgian and Tithonian stages there is pegged at about 152.1 million years ago.
What was the environment like?
Quite varied. There were shallow marine areas, lagoons, tidal flats, low coastal zones, but also vegetated inland areas.
What kind of plants?
Dominated by conifers, it seems. Think ancient pine-like forests, cycads, ferns, that sort of vegetation.
And the climate.
Likely subtropical to tropical, probably with distinct wet and dry seasons. Similar in age to the Morrison Formation in North America, but Tendaguru has those marine layers mixed in.
Showing that connection to the coast.
Exactly. It was a coastal system, at least in part.
And Giraffatitan wasn't alone there, was it?
Not by a long shot. It shared its world with a whole bunch of other dinosaurs.
Other sauropods?
Several. Dicryosaurus, Genentia, Tendaguria, Torniaria, a diverse sauropod fauna.
Plant eaters too?
Ornithischians like the little Dicellosaurus and the very distinctive spiky Kentrosaurus.
And the predators must have been some big ones.
There were. We have evidence for things tentatively identified as Allosaurus and Ceratosaurus, plus definite species like Elaphrosaurus, the Duraprustosaurus, and the Spinosaurid Osteophorosaurus.
A dangerous place to live, even if you are huge.
Definitely. Plus pterosaurs like Tenegaripterus in the skies, and loads of other life corals, shellfish, sharks, fish, crocodiles, even tiny early mammals like Branchitherulum.
It really paints a picture of a whole complex ecosystem.
Absolutely, a vibrant late Jurassic world.
So wrapping up our deep dive on Giraffatitan, we've covered its just incredible scale.
The amazing story of its discovery and excavation.
And the fascinating, ongoing scientific journey to understand its classification and how it lived.
And I think a key aha moment for many is realizing how that initial idea of it being an African Brachiosaurus evolved.
Right. The careful science that led to recognizing it as its own distinct genus, Giraffatitan, based on real anatomical evidence.
It really underscores how science refines our understanding over time. It's a process.
So hopefully you listening have journeyed back with us to the late Jurassic and gained a deeper appreciation for this truly iconic giant.
Which leaves us with a final thought to chew on. Considering the sheer size of Giraffatitan and the richness of the Tindaguru finds, what other secrets about Jurassic giants might still be hidden in those Tanzanian rocks?
And maybe more profoundly, what did being that big truly mean for Giraffatitan, for its daily life, its behavior, its whole place in that ancient world? Something to ponder.